You're thinking about Doughnuts by me, Michael Rosen. Chapter 11. Come on, said the plastic skeleton. Let's go, let's go. Where's General Fawcett's treasure? Said Frank. Can't stop now, said the plastic skeleton. So without hanging about, they all dashed off up the corridor towards the Longstones. The plastic skeleton in the lead, shouting, "Now for the real wild man! Oh, pickled onions! Pickled onions!" They all arrived at the door marked Private, more or less together. The plastic skeleton, the giant fly, Frank and his mother in his hand. "We're going in," said the plastic skeleton. Through the doors they went, past the wooden faces and heads and masks. "That's General Fawcett's treasure," said the giant fly. "That's the stuff the Nigerians want back." "Well, what's it doing here?" said Frank. "Can't stop now. Yep, can't stop now," said the plastic skeleton, and they rushed on into the Longstones' room. There stood Mrs. Longstone, exactly as Frank had left her, standing frozen to the floor, staring down at Mr. Longstone lying in the glass case, stretched out on the floor. They hadn't moved. "Oh, that's hopeless," said the plastic skeleton. "I can't ask them now. Look at them. I'll never find out where he is now. I'll never find the real wild man. This whole thing has been a waste of time, and it's your fault, boy. If you hadn't come in here and frozen them, I could have found out." "But you said that it was too dangerous to come in here yourself," said Frank. "Shut up," said the plastic skeleton. The giant fly had an idea. "Let's look through their books and papers." "Can I have a rest?" said Mum. The plastic skeleton and the giant fly went over to the desk and the drawers and began a long search through everything. Books flew in all directions, drawers were tipped up, pieces of paper fell to the floor, cups were knocked over, ink was spilt. Frank sat with Mum in his hand and watched. Every now and then the giant fly or the plastic skeleton would grunt, or mutter or go, but nothing much until suddenly the plastic skeleton stood up with a bit of paper in his hand and screamed. He screamed and screamed. "Ah!" As he screamed, Frank ran over to him and looked at the piece of paper in his hand. On it was written, "The Wild Man of Ashton Forest." The skeleton of the Wild Man of Ashton Forest is in fact the skeleton of John Straw, a lunatic. There never was a Wild Man of Ashton Forest. Many deaths, bad weather, floods and illnesses were blamed on the Wild Man. John Straw never lived anywhere near Ashton Forest. His skeleton was given to the museum by the warden of Grey Towers Asylum. All this was written in old handwriting. The date was 1879, and there was someone's name there too. Herbert Longstone. Underneath it was written, "We have made a plastic copy and buried the John Straw skeleton in Grey Towers Cemetery. This very popular exhibit can stay on show for a while longer." And it was stamped, City Museum. This time there was no date. The plastic skeleton went on screaming, "Ah! I'm not real! I'm not real!" As he screamed on and on, Frank saw him very slowly crumple, shrink, collapse, and slowly turn into dust in front of his eyes. Then with him went the giant fly, crumbling, shrinking, breaking down and down into dust. And then the Longstones too, their room, the walls, the doors with their signs on, even his mother in his hand, they all crumbled to dust in front of his eyes, crumbling, 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 until all he could see was a haze of dust. All that was left was Frank himself and General Fawcett's treasure. The faces and the masks looked at Frank. One of the great big dark eyes stared at him. Frank stared back into the deep dark eyes, and slowly but surely into those eyes all the people he had met began to appear. One after another they came into view. The plastic skeleton, the stone men, spacesuit Tiger, the Bartlett collection, Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, the giant fly, Embryo, the Longstones, Joseph Bryman, the pickle factory women, General Fawcett and his tiny, tiny, tiny mum. Then bit by bit, just as all the people had appeared in the big dark eye, they now disappeared. All except for his mum. She was the last. And Frank stared at her, standing in the dark eye. As Frank stared at her, it seemed to him that she was getting nearer and nearer and nearer. And as she got nearer, she was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And suddenly there she was standing over him. She spoke to him. "That's it. My job's done for another week. Come on, you. Home we go." Frank got up, picked up his comic, and followed Mum to the side door. As he followed her, he had to walk past the glass cases. The first one he recognised was the one full of bowls and jugs that the stone men were going to throw at him. "That's going back to Nigeria, Mum," said Frank. "Yeah, so's your Uncle Charlie," said Mum. "I haven't got an Uncle Charlie," said Frank. "Well, he's not going back to Nigeria then, is he, son?" said Mum. A few seconds later, they passed by the glass case of the plastic skeleton of the wild man of Ashton Forest. There it stood, absolutely still. There was the sign. For years the wild man roamed through Ashton Forest, terrifying children, threatening farmers and killing cattle, until finally it died in 1886. This is a plastic copy of the original skeleton. "Rubbish," said Frank. "That's rubbish." "Oh, Frank, don't talk about things you know nothing about," said Mum. "Come on now." And Mum and Frank walked out of the museum into the night. I hope you enjoyed your thinking about Doughnuts. If you want to know more about all the new stories and poems I put up here on Kids Poems and Stories with Michael Rosen, then why not follow the link and subscribe to the channel.